like that it lets me mark it though, because it shows it to me later in post. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Frame by Frame podcast. I'm here with Will Carson and Florian Boelter. Today, we are going to cover a little bit about Florian, the Open Doors platform, and our current job market. And so, without waiting, we'll just jump right in. Will, do you have any questions you'd like to start with, or Florian?
Yeah, I'd just like to say hello. Hi everyone, my name is Florian. Maybe I'll just give a really brief introduction about like who I
Absolutely.
am, where I work.
Of
Okay,
course.
all right. So yeah, my name is Florian. I'm based in Germany, in Hanover to be precise, and I'm also a fellow Career Foundry alumni. A couple of years back now, and yeah, my current place of work is Juro, a UK-based startup in the legal space for contract management. And yeah, I'm a senior product designer there. But yeah, I think we're probably going to talk a bit more about what else I'm known for, which is the Open Doors platform that I initiated earlier this year, and that seeks to help, yeah, basically assist juniors in finding their first job through job board, but a lot more. And yeah, maybe that counts as an introduction.
That was a great introduction because I was going to start by asking what your background was before going into
Mhm.
design and what brought you to Career Foundry in general.
Yeah,
Because we're all Career Foundry alumni and we all have relatively different backgrounds, but
yeah.
we all ended up there for some reason. So,
Maybe wildly different backgrounds.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess in terms of career, the it's actually not that wild. Like I was a product manager for a year before I transitioned into design, which is I guess very close already in tech and also already has touch points with design, which by the way is also kind of the reason I then later transitioned into design because I learned a lot about design in that job that I didn't know before. And that was just something that resonated so heavily with me that I made the decision to, change a little more. But before that, I actually got my master's degree in German literature, which I guess is pretty different from design. And I was actually trying to aim for an academic career, but yeah, doing my master's, first of all, I felt that this was not 100% aligned with what I thought it would be. And then not everything turned out in my favor. Like academia is generally a tough field, and it became gradually harder during those years. And I just decided, I got to go somewhere else. And I've always been drawn to tech, really. Always been, around tech since I was a child and always felt very comfortable around it. And I know that I had a lot of skills that, others don't necessarily have. And I thought, okay, maybe I can make something of it. And I found that product management job. And while I guess it wasn't the best first job you could ever have, I'm still kind of grateful that I had it because yeah, I think it enabled me to do what I'm doing now. And yeah, and then about Career Foundry, I got to that. So obviously did my research when I quit that product management job and decided to go into design or I thought about it, and then I found Career Foundry almost quite happy with what I saw there in terms of like how they handle things, and like comparing them to other boot camps, to other programs, and I ended up doing the UI course. I think I already knew that I wanted to do a holistic kind of role when I finished that, and therefore kind of doing like both UX and UI, and I am now a product designer, so I am doing exactly that. But through that product management role, I already had some background in UX, and that was, I think, how I decided to do UI because if I want to work holistically, I gotta kind of do a little bit of everything. So I gotta have the skills in UI as well, and so figured that I'd fill that gap that I had there and did the UI course. And I think till date, I have not regretted that. Like, I think that still think that was the right decision. Yeah.
Do you find you're playing the role of a generalist at your current position?
So, I mean, this is now the depending on how you count, like probably I'd say the second full-time position I had. And going from the first to the second one, I figured out a lot about like what my strengths are really. And I think I found out that like my strength is really in strategic design and like um, bit more on the UX side, even I'd say, and like analytical and data driven things, and a little less on the UI side, for example. So I definitely think that I have a profile that has a strong suit. But for in general, I think yeah, I'm very much generalist. Like I like to be across the whole spectrum, which is why I aimed for such a role. And but I think eventually, and I think we're going to touch on that later. But I think it's very like everyone has this kind of strong suit. Like no matter what you do, like you might be more visual type, you might be more strategic or analytical and things like that. And I think it's very important to find that out about yourself, because for me that took like a really long time. I had to go through a full role to really find out like who I am as a designer. And I think people can do that earlier. But yeah, um, for me that's that.
No, I think that's very important. This is my first official role at a company. As I started as their junior UX, and then at the moment I'm their lead design, lead UX, and
Mm,
I'm kind of elbowing my way into the product management. And that was more at the moment because I know everything that's going on as far as
mm,
what is involved in our project, and so I'm usually the guy people are coming to for answers about something if they don't already have that knowledge. And I don't know if I enjoy that part of my my job as
mm,
much, but um, I do find it fun because it's. I mean, who doesn't like to know what's going on? So it's definitely a different opportunity. But this is something I did not expect when I made my transition over. So,
mm.
but no, it is also yeah a very generalist role. Would you say that's something important for people transitioning or even new junior designers? Is even though it's nice to know where your strengths are, maybe it's better in this market, I guess, to be a generalist.
Yeah, I think definitely that the trend is going towards like product design roles that are like by nature pretty holistic and like, asking for generalist approaches. I definitely think this is beneficial. I think if you look back and talk to people that transition into the field like 10 years ago or like at least more than five, you find that they were very often, asked to specialize pretty heavily quite early on. And you don't find that anymore. I think you just gotta show skills across the board, and then you have like one strong suit that is like the T shape basically.
Mm-hmm.
So the vertical. Um, but aside from that, like you got to be able to do some research. You got to be able to um, participate in like discovery and things that designers, I think traditionally, like looking back way earlier, did not necessarily take part in 10 years ago or something like that. And then up to like handoff and even overlooking implementation to an extent, depending on the role. So there's everything, and you got to do it all to some degree. And obviously, each role is different. So there might be roles, where visual part is a lot heavier than the strategic part, or maybe product managers are like extremely proactive and like you only have to do very little in like discovery. But then there are other roles where like maybe there's a lot of things that you have to bring to the table for sure these days. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I find that very interesting um, because again, I had a graphic design and visual communications background. Can you hear me?
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, there was an echo going on. Sorry, I wasn't sure. But yeah, with that background, you were never really at the table for anything other than being asked about design styles, how the branding should go. And then in my current role, you're very much at the table all the time, which I think is maybe that's the future of UX, and I think that's actually a good thing, is that design is more involved in the process as far as UX and UI, because I mean they're asking for us to do that job anyway, but if everybody's on the same page as far as design goes, I think the product will be, any company's end product will be better overall, because it's not something that was just like, oh yeah, we have all these ideas, here's everything, make us something pretty for it and see what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, you see that a lot in like companies like Airbnb that are like design led,
Mm-hmm.
basically, where product management roles transform. I'm not one to say like get rid of them because I think they're very important and like what they do, but obviously I think their job description is changing a lot right now. Like similar to like how traditional UX has kind of transformed into product design now. Not fully, obviously. There are still roles that are purely UX, and it's good. But especially in larger organizations, but like the product management role, I think hasn't really didn't really have that revolution yet, and I think they might be in for it, at least in some companies, and I think that's good because there's a lot of like what I've experienced in my past roles, all of them, was that very often management like or leadership saw product management as like um, throwing obstacles into the way by process by introducing process, and it's like really yeah that's something like when you start noticing that that they are like in for maybe a little bit of change, and yeah I think they're just going there now, and seeing companies like Airbnb like spearheading that's really really cool development.
I really like how you mentioned that it kind of took you your whole first role to understand what you were good at in the UX or product space. Because I'm experiencing the same thing right now. I finished up with Career Foundry back in last December, and I've been working my first job this year, but it's a very early startup, so there are no clearly defined lines. It's usually just me meeting with the founder once a week and just talking like, hey, what needs to be done this week? No solid lines of where I should stop my work or where I should stop digging my nose into. It's really just do what feels like it needs done. And then after all the chaos is done, then I could sit back and really think about what I've done and what I was good at. And so I think you're super right. It's going to take me this entire first role to really understand what it is that I was good at here.
Yeah. Yeah, but like a startup is like for me it was like I've only worked in startups since I've transitioned to design, and I think they're excellent places to first of all like find out about that, and then second of all like accelerate your like growth, your personal growth, because sometimes there's just problems that are thrown in front of you and you got to solve them. There's no one you can like rely on to solve them for you, like no manager to go
Right.
to that has like all these years of experience, maybe like a lot more than you do, that can help you. And like I mean obviously you can always like look for someone outside of a company, but then they lack context, and it's really tough. And I think I've grown through that so much in my first role especially. So yeah, I think you're in for a good ride there.
Yeah.
Do you see your Sorry, Will. Do you see yourself like staying in the startup side of everything then, as far as long
Uh,
term goes, or do you have plans to move into a larger organization?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've pondered about that a lot when I switched my roles, my last roles, because my first company, the first full time role was in a startup that had Series A funding in the end, so pretty early still, actually, I'd say. I started there when they were still seed funded, and then they scored the Series A in the meantime. But it was all very like rough and like still finding product market fit and all of these things. So very wild ride. And then the company I'm with now, I joined when they already raised Series B and are now like working towards Series C. And that's already such a huge difference in terms of like how they're organized, how mature the product is, and like, the types of tasks that you have. Like for example, in the first role, I sometimes had to build like landing pages in Webflow, just like well, like generally stuff there, which was not something that was like at all part of my job description. Usually, I just had to like put out little fires or like just jump in where like there was a gap in knowledge with other people. And that's something that doesn't really happen that often now. Like this, like more mature company, there's usually processes in place for these things. So that being said, I do enjoy both. And I definitely would like to try eventually, to work in a much more structured company and in a bigger one. But I think what I can definitely say is that my heart is with startups. Like, I love the fast paced nature. I love this make and break things. And I am like a builder, I think. And like, yeah, at heart at least. Like, and that'll never leave me. So I've I think I might give it a chance at some point, like to join a bigger, more structured company. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised if I go back to the startup world after that.
I could see that where that would be extremely beneficial to have that experience in a very organized, structured company, because you could bring aspects of that back to your next role in a startup. But that's really cool because I share that same mentality. As in my role, I can't imagine doing another role. Like I really enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy that there's a lot of diversity to it because I'm also somebody that tends to get bored after a minute. Does that make sense? Like, I can't do the same monotonous thing every day. It wouldn't, um, that wouldn't work for me. But I'm at
Yeah,
the other extreme right now where you're never on one thing for long enough to really even start getting bored.
Hmm.
So
yeah,
it's a lot of jumping. But yeah, no, I don't know if I have a desire to go to a large organization really.
yeah,
I think I would stay in the startup space, but that's currently my standing.
yeah.
So
Same here.
Yeah, for me, it's also like um, like how long decisions take. For example, that's something that can annoy me really quickly. Like not just like in my personal like work life or whatever. Like if I just think about government, for example, in Germany, like things take ages to like be done, and I'm very annoyed by this in general because I like simple and effective solutions, and that often doesn't seem like that to me. So I think, yeah, while I said like I would give it a chance, it would have to be a company that kind of like can really win me over with like very specific things, I guess. Like for example, a very like attractive product and just a super interesting product to work on, and like a role that's focused on something that I'm super interested in. It would have to be that. I would not just join, I don't know, Meta or something for like a let's just say standard role, because I think that I would not be happy there for a long time. I would just rather join, a right now completely unknown startup, rather than that. But like I don't know, there are some companies out there that I definitely like to take a look at that are larger. But yeah, again, like it's quite specific, I guess.
I think that's really good though because it shows where your heart is as far as design and product design in general. So that's probably a good thing. Will, if you have anything else, uh, you
Yep.
can go right ahead.
I
Otherwise,
I've actually worked on an operations team in an aerospace engineering company that did contract work for the U.S. government before, and that was painfully slow. I know exactly what you're talking about with the government stuff just taking so long, and maybe companies or maybe massive companies that don't do contract work for the government are faster, probably, but I still don't think I can go back to that pace. I'm realizing more and more now that my tasks with my startup are not like, hey, I want you to do a good job at designing. It's very much I want you to do your best for the product. And I really like, I mean that's my definition of it anyway, but I really like that that's the mission. Do my best instead of be a designer and hit all these bullet points, which I think is what you're going to get at the larger organizations. Um, and I've kind of seen that mission of do your best at other small initiatives that I've tried. Like back in Boy Scouts when I held leadership roles, you're only on a small team. Or back when I was a resident assistant in college, it was a small team. Um, and just, I think I end up getting way more fulfillment in that sort of environment instead.
So what got you into this open doors thing? Because I started promoting it after I saw it a few times. I'm like, okay, what is this? And then I had seen your post and didn't immediately at that point realize you were involved with it. I had no idea. And I was like, oh wait, he has something to do with this. And then I looked and I was like, oh, so like he's just this is his thing. This is
Yeah.
perfect. And I love your posts. They're great. So I follow you a lot on LinkedIn. But
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what drove you to this yeah, aim, I guess we would say.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, like, thank you. That was like really kind words, obviously. And I get that a lot, that like people don't realize that I'm the one behind it, because in the beginning I was like, I thought I'd build a brand that was like detached from me, like at least to a good extent. But then I realized, like, just by doing content, that it is much easier to gain an audience if there's a person behind it. Like, I kept the open doors around because I built a bit of a brand by now, and I like the brand, but I am now in a process of like connecting it a lot more with like me, and making sure that like across the channels it's visible that this is me. But yeah, what drove me to it? So as I said earlier, I'm a builder. I love to build stuff. So like not only design, but also like, then kind of get it somewhere. I can code, but not like super well, like very basic stuff. So I wouldn't just be able to like do it in React or whatever, stuff like that. But I love no code tools. So Webflow is something, I think I mentioned that earlier as well, or like Framer now very recently. It's like these are tools that I love to use, and I just like to build stuff with it, like dabble with it, see what's possible, what's not possible. And so when the time at my first role came, like not too close yet, but like was about to, I was thinking, there might be a little bit of a gap in between, and also I've always felt the urge ever since I transitioned into design to like, just build a side project and a side hustle, even if that's possible. But to be fair, like, or to be honest, like the main motive was not to make any money or something like that. It was just like, for the fun of building it, and doing something. So I brainstormed a lot of ideas and like a lot of things, and also looked at them from a product perspective, like where's a problem that actually needs solving. um, and I found, I remembered the struggles that I had myself when I transitioned into design. Like, I think that my path was definitely one of the more positive ones. Didn't took me ages to transition. I had like, little successes every now and then. There was no like major setbacks, or like months over months of no interviews. It was definitely, I think, going quite well for me, but I saw a lot of people around me struggle, um like struggle a lot, and some even really lose hope, and very few even completely turning their back on the whole thing. um and I found that like really sad. I mean, I know that after all, it might not be for every single person that decides to make the move. It might just be that it's okay, but still, I felt there was so much potential lost at some places, and so much, despair at certain moments, that maybe wasn't necessarily, didn't necessarily need to be there. So I looked at the situation as it was now, like basically in 2023, and obviously found, as we all know, that to be even worse. So now it's even harder to find a job, to get interviews in the first place, especially as a junior, but even as a senior now. Um, and still, so many people come out of these boot camps. I don't have exact numbers, and I think that probably it peaked a little during the pandemic, just because everyone was at home. Many people lost their jobs and had like this opportunity, but still, there's significant numbers of people coming out of these programs, and it's hard. And it's even for like graduate students at universities. For them, it's about the same. Like I'm talking to a lot of them, and they have the same struggle. So I found this to be a huge problem. But obviously, a solution wasn't something that came like easy. So I thought I'd start by solving the easiest or the biggest problem that was solvable with the least amount of effort that I could find in this space. And that was a very simple one, just finding jobs that are actually suitable for juniors. Like so many jobs don't carry that title, but are still, meant to be for them. And then LinkedIn, which is, I think, the first place most of us look for jobs, just makes it so hard to find them because their filters are not completely useless, but they are definitely super hard to navigate, and they still give you so much stuff that's not relevant. So I thought, I can dump this down and I can make this easier and I can just aggregate things. And I launched a job board. I called it Open Doors, built it in Webflow. And, the idea was, okay, maybe I can get companies to list jobs with me, but I quickly found out that was actually not that easy. Because for them, if you take a look at like how quickly they get applicants for these roles when they post them, hundreds of them, they didn't have any pain like getting applicants for their roles. So, okay, that was not something that was worth doing. But I set up a newsletter for just for the purpose of actually bringing people back to the platform and keeping them in the know about new roles, um, without having to come to the platform directly all the time. And that got a lot of signups really quickly. And I was very surprised by that and pretty happy about it as well. And I thought, okay, maybe this is your time to try content, like content creation and actually helping them beyond just finding the jobs and actually telling them what they can do to like apply to them and actually landing interviews. So I started to dabble with that as well and got a lot of positive feedback, a lot of questions about like certain topics and certain problem spaces, and yeah, it developed from there really. That was really what I think for me. I was like on fire. I was like really caught by the reactions that I got and like hearing the same things from so many people, and then also hearing that like what I told them actually helped. Like it did help them land an interview, or it did help them like understanding what might be wrong with their material right now, things like that. And yeah, and here we are. At the moment, it's going strong, and I think I'm still finding like what I exactly offer in that regard. Like I'm still experimenting a little bit, but I definitely know that I want to help them because I know now that I can't solve this overarching problem of like how like juniors are perceived and how like this market behaves. That's, I think, too much for one person, but I think I can ease it. I can ease the pain.
I think at the moment that's one reason we started our podcast is we were watching all these connections, contacts, if you will, on LinkedIn, and it's disparaging to see people really just biting it at some point.
They're
Like,
in
what
pain.
what can I do now? Yeah, like luckily mine didn't last so long, but I was also unemployed for a while, and it was getting to that point where I'm like, I at this point will go do any job to just put a paycheck there and be miserable. I don't care. But originally, that was not my purpose of transitioning to a new career path, is to be miserable. Like that's why I was leaving what I had been doing. So, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I saw you have a lot of stuff posted on Open Doors, and it's from all over, which is great. Are these people contacting you to post, or are you finding things and filtering them?
Mixed by now. I think it's mixed. In the beginning, it was purely me scraping stuff. By the way, big shout out to my wife. I know she will listen to this. She's helping a lot with that now, like
Awesome.
these days. She is really, yeah, she's a really big help there. Yeah, and so we definitely get submissions from companies for internships, but also for actual roles. And I always make sure that I feature these roles even like even more heavily to make sure that I pay back to these companies that put some trust in me. But and I always hear that they get like lots of good applicants as well from here, which is obviously a really really great thing said about our community or about my community. Um, but yeah, I think the most part is still aggregated, just because what I mentioned earlier, like many companies don't really face this problem where they are like, okay, I'll just post this on LinkedIn, I'll just get these 300 applicants. But what you see a lot as well is like they then close the role like after a day or two after getting 300 applicants. Um, and then a couple of days later they open it again because they probably realize, oh well, that like they weren't like not suited or whatever. So we have to do it all over again, and instead they could just go to a more niche job board that would help them with like a smaller pool of applicants, but that's actually like informed about like what it takes and is in need of these roles. But yeah, that's I guess a learning process. And even though I'm not actively pursuing companies anymore to like post with me, because I did that in the beginning, like a lot of cold emailing about like roles that I found like very good for the platform, but like barely any response. But like I find that there's definitely a bit of an uptick now. I think that's probably because of the increased exposure that Open Doors has received in the last couple of months. But yeah, I hope that at some point I can actually go into a conversation with companies and like talk about expectations and like what would help them beyond just posting the job. But yeah, that's a thing for 2024, I guess.
Um, what do you how do you feel about the what is that fast application via LinkedIn, or what is that, the quick app?
Yeah, I guess you can do that if you have like like FANG companies on your LinkedIn profile, and like if you've worked as a UX designer at Google or whatever, you can probably do that and still get an interview. But aside from that, it's tough. I think that this is stripping all the chances, especially as a junior, of like standing out. Obviously, your resume and your portfolio ideally already do a lot of that, but this is usually not including a cover letter or any kind of way of like personalizing an application. So for me, like I personally, I've never had an interview for a role that had this feature, like not once. While with others, I think I had a decent score, like a decent average of like sending an application, getting an interview, just because I was not really able to personalize it. One thing, for example, that I really love to do with startups and that resonated so well is instead of doing a normal cover letter, I record a little video like via Loom or any other tool that does this for you, like camera and screen recording. And I introduce myself in like a minute or two, talking about the exact same things I talk about in the cover letter, but just like way more natural and way more personal. Um, and I've had a lot of like interviews because of that, because the recruiter first thing they said was like, I loved your video, like that stood out, that was something, and that you can't do that with the LinkedIn feature,
Hmm.
really. Like you can maybe sneak in a link sometimes they ask questions where you can do that, but it just feels like mass applications to me, really. So I'm not a big fan.
I do feel like some companies actually use that as a filter itself. So they'll put that option and people just dump resumes in it. And if there's been a few where if you scroll down past the actual CTA to throw in your application, they have, if you'd actually like and to apply with our company, please email this
Seen
email.
that one
So
before.
anybody that's touched that button, it's gone. You're just
Yeah.
throwing it in the trash for yourself.
Yeah. By the way, we don't list any, like, we don't list jobs that only have this option and have no other option of like applying. Just because for of that reason, like if I feel like it's just, I just send people there to waste their time, really. And until there's like, so when I see that there might be other options, I always check out their career site and stuff. And often I find that they actually listed this job elsewhere with their ATS system or something, and then I list that, but I never list the like fast apply jobs from LinkedIn because of these exact reasons.
I do really like that you sent in a video. I wondered if there's a way. Yeah, I thought about this the other day. I started doing some behavioral psychology reading because it fascinated me. I read one long article about it. I'm like, okay, they mentioned a book. I'm gonna get this book, and so I started reading. And I had this thought the other day when I saw a post from somebody about applying, and I'm like, maybe as a UX designer, we should really be using psychology in our applications. Like, put you put the human factor in yours. You are no longer an email. You are no longer a page of text. You became a face to go with, a description of a person applying for a job, and it seems like it works for you. And I wonder if that also plays into it, not only being qualified and standing out, but now you've put a face to an application or resume where a picture doesn't do it justice, and a page of a cover letter just will never touch it because it's more they have to read. And I think a lot of people just skip the cover letter and move on to the quick stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think there's a lot of proof for that actually when you look at other like things about the application process. For example, referrals. Like that is basically social proof, right? So someone else that might already be in the company or was with the company has put in a good word for you, basically. And we know that referrals in most cases lead to the first interview, and from there you go. It doesn't necessarily mean that you actually get the job, but it makes you so much more likely to get an interview. Um, and I think that's the same. Like again, that's psychology really behind that. Obviously, I don't really talk often about referrals with juniors because for them it's really hard to get them. Like unless they know a bunch of people that are already in the industry, which is mostly not the case. They usually start completely fresh, have no network whatsoever, um, and therefore I talk about like how to build these up for the future and how to, just increase the chances of this happening. But usually I don't try to talk about that too much because it's pretty tough. But yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
So do we have any I know you touched on it before, but do you have any predictions for what's going to happen next year? I mean, this episode will air on Christmas Eve, and I think a lot of designers out there are holding their breath till the new year, because they're just tired now. But yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think's coming for the market at this point?
Yeah. I feel like a financial analyst, like analyzing the stock market, because I think I think that like the vulnerability of the market is similar. But that being said, I think first of all, a good message, I guess. I think these like huge layoffs we've been seeing are over. Like you might still see like one or two in the new year. We just saw very recently, I think one with Etsy and one with Spotify, which were quite heartbreaking. I knew people in both companies, gladly not affected, but like obviously they are still emotionally affected by this, losing a lot of colleagues. Um, but I think that these will become less and less with the new year, just because the economy overall is slowly recovering, very slowly. But if you look, especially in Europe, it's stabilizing again. And obviously, unless something drastic happens once more, I think we're going to come back from that. But as in terms of the UX market and the job market, I think we are in for a little bit of a plateau. So you will not all of a sudden see a big boom next year. I'm pretty sure about that. Like we've seen
really this boom during COVID, like mostly. Like if you compare the roles posted, you had a really big explosion of roles in during COVID. And then all of these, or a lot of these people, not necessarily the same people, but like a lot of these roles were like spilled out onto the street now with all these layoffs again. And we will not just see another mindless boom just after that. Like that won't happen. I don't really think so. But it with the economy recovering, I think that companies start to stabilize again as well. They start to build out new teams. They start to just lose people in a natural way as well, like basically them leaving company, going elsewhere, and roles will open up again a little bit more. So I think I'm carefully optimistic. That's what I'd call it. Like looking at open doors, like obviously posting like most of the junior roles that are out there. Um, I was just surprised to see like you so many roles still in December going live, for example. Like that's a good sign because that is preparation for hiring season, which is like starting basically with the new year. Um, and I think that yeah, it's just double down right now. Like if you're still waiting right now, double down on it. Like make sure you got that portfolio in good shape. Make sure you start building connections out with people and companies you'd like to work for, especially if it's larger companies, because they are often, obviously more likely to post roles. The larger the company, the more likely it might be that they're looking for someone new on any team they open up or where someone left. And make sure that like what we talked about earlier, like what your strengths are as much as you can know that at this point. But like for example, if you come from a certain background and just have, for example, highly analytical skills, like that's something you can leverage to stand out, and make sure to do that. Like that's what I always tell people, and so far it has helped a lot of people that I've told them, like when I've told them that. And just prepare.
That's pretty good. Do you have any more advice as far as what juniors or transitioners can do to increase their chances in the sense or in the case that the market does start opening up?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, really know where you want to go. Like that's basically, if you look at this like a yin yang thing, like one side is like knowing who you are, and the other side is like knowing where you want to go. Because if you do that, you get a profile of yourself, and then you get a profile of like a place you'd like to work in, or like a kind of role that you want to do. And if you match these, you will look at like job descriptions very differently. What is always like a little bit of a um, yeah, controversy is probably the wrong word, but like I always get these questions like, how can that be right? I always tell people to apply less. Like
I like
that's
that.
always controversial, especially with juniors. Yeah, yeah, you like that? Why do you like that?
Well, I unofficially mentor a couple bootcamp students in UX or people who are freshly out of it, and I didn't work with my startup in September and October to take a little bit of a break, just increase my skills, increase my knowledge, and just get a little bit of a direction going. And it really made me realize if I don't. So applying less for me means I know where I want to go, and I'm not going to spend my time or energy applying to everything. It also made me realize if I do apply to everything, then I'm basically not really creating a brand for myself or knowing who I am. I'm basically telling companies, hey, I can be whoever you need to be, which is much more wishy washy than this is who I am, this is what I'm good at. And just knowing who you are and what you're good at is definitely going to help you get a job way better than the shapeshifter strategy.
Exactly. That's on point. Like that's exactly why I tell this to people, because if you just put this wishy-washy approach out there and you just like mass apply basically to every role that you are just like, from a I don't know geographical standpoint or something, not even that necessarily. I see people like applying for roles that they need a work permit or visa for that they don't have, and like just think that people are going to sponsor it, which is usually not happening. But like, just applying for roles even in your geographical location, just because they are theoretically like suitable for junior or someone of your experience level, that's not enough. And you don't lose out anything. Like, you don't lose out if you don't apply to a role that is just absolutely not fitting your skill set and like where you want to go as well. Like, for example, I would probably never apply for, I don't know, roles in like super traditional companies. And even if one put out a role here and I'm in need of a role, I would not apply there just because I know that there might be this thought of like, okay, I can make it work. Yeah, maybe. Even if like that obviously assumes I get that job, which usually doesn't happen, because this company like catches much earlier that you are not a good candidate, which is fair, which is absolutely fair. But even if you get that job, you won't be happy and it probably won't last long. And so I know that like juniors are especially desperate, which I 100% get. Like, you transition your career, you give up your old career, you usually don't have a job anymore because most people don't do this part time because it's really tough. So they give up their jobs and they have a certain, like, lifeline or a certain timeline that they have to get this done in, until they start running into problems. And so they just think, okay, I'm just going to like apply to every single thing. But that's not the right approach. So find out who you are, find out where you want to go, what type of role you want. It doesn't necessarily need to be type of company. I always say this, like, in case you already know that the startup space is like highly interesting to you, okay, go target. But I just say this because usually this changes the approach that you can take. So if you know, it helps, but if not, that's fine as well. But at least know what type of role you want, and then make sure that your resume and your portfolio are like tailored towards that, and really make it shine, like what you can do and what your skill set is. And if that disqualifies you for all these roles that were never meant for you in the first place, it's perfectly fine. That's totally okay because you never wanted these roles in the first place. And yeah, and I just see, like, when people come to me, I just see so many generic approaches that are trying to catch all. And that's the exact reason why they don't get interviews, why it doesn't work, because they are just like generic to everyone instead of like being specific for some. And if you are being specific for some, they are going to start noticing you. So yeah. I think that's like the best advice, the biggest thing I can give right now.
I think that also helps minimize the amount of rejections you have to put up with mentally as well. If you're only applying to stuff that fits you, then you shouldn't feel as bad when you're, you know, denied that opportunity because, hey, maybe somebody more qualified applied for it, but it was still what you wanted, as opposed to a job. Yes, you just got a rejection from there. Maybe you didn't want it, but you felt that because you met whatever requirements were in the listing, well, now I'm not good enough. Like, now I'm getting rejected from all these. And it's like, well, that's not exactly the reason, but it hurts each time. It's not making it any better for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, obviously, there's like a flip side of it as well. If you're like just applying for fewer roles, like each rejection might hurt you a little bit more because you feel like, if you just apply for 5 instead of 20, like 1 out of 5 is a lot more than 1 out of 20. But again, I think your chances with the other 4 are just so much higher than with the 19 other if you take the mass approach. um, and just asking for feedback with these 5 you're more invested in is probably easier for you as well. And that's also a thing I always urge people to do: ask for feedback. Like, I've been taught this at the beginning of my journey as well, and I did not really do it in the beginning, but once I did, it changed a lot of things because they were actually giving me like feedback on things that were wrong. And it started to form a pattern. Like, multiple people said the same thing. So at some point, you think, okay, probably there's something to it. I changed these things, and all of a sudden, it got better. So definitely ask for feedback, even if it hurts. The rejections always hurt. No matter if it was a job that felt is meant for you, or just a role that would be nice, I guess. Still, like, it always hurts. But asking for that feedback is the best you can do in this point and the most you can get out of this opportunity that just closed. So yeah, definitely do that.
You touched on the emotional aspect earlier of like understanding that you're trying to do a job that you like and trying to get away from the jobs you hate, and for that reason it's okay to not to apply for some. And that's, again, basically the same thing I tell my mentees. Like, listen, if you go for any job out there and you get just any job, well, you hated your last career so much that you went for a career change. The goal of a career change is to not do another career change. It's to get something that you actually enjoy
Yeah.
and are fulfilled by. And it's rough when you get different coaches out there saying, like, hey, you need to apply to X number of jobs per week, or reach out to Y number of people per week, whereas it should be find the exact companies you really, really want to be at, or the exact jobs you really want to be doing, because that's how we get to fulfillment,
Yeah.
and that's how we skip doing a second career change.
Exactly. And again, that does not mean that you end up only applying for like to 5 roles a month or something. Like in most cases, unless you have like a super specific geography and don't really want to do remote work, and I don't know, like there can be factors that might limit your selection a little bit. But if you're like in a in a normal situation, you still end up applying to like, I don't know, 5 jobs a week or something, because unless you have an extremely specific skill set you really want to leverage, you're always going to find these. Like it's not like there's 100 millions of different roles out there. They're usually either looking for something a bit more on the visual side or a bit more on the strategic side, and then maybe a bit more like on research or whatever. And that's like, just pick these out and just forget about the rest, because there are other people with the profile more fitting that are going to get those interviews, and that's okay. Yeah.
Well, great. I'm actually super happy you were on. This has been wonderful. I was super excited when we were talking and you said you would do the show. So thank you again
Yeah.
for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. Like, this is really, really cool. This is the first time I'm on a podcast, to be 100% honest.
Cool.
And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And thank you for obviously, mentioning open doors and supporting it in that way. Um, and yeah, love what you guys are doing here. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. I will end the episode unless Will has more, because we are running up to our hour limit. We're trying to keep ourselves, otherwise we'll just keep going.
I got a short one.
Hmm.
I have 2 short ones, but I'll lead with one short one. I went and looked at your LinkedIn activity over the last 12 months, just to be creepy. And I saw that you had a post literally just last week that hit over 100 comments in 24 hours. I think that's right. I saw that. I think on average you were hitting somewhere between 10 and 20 comments on most of the others. How did that feel, that one? How would you help people in 5 words or less? I know it was more specific than that, but was it exciting to see that get as much attention as it did?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. Like, it's so cool. Like, the LinkedIn journey is, I think, the newest part of open doors that I've explored, really. And I've never done content in my life before. Like, I've always been a lurker in everything, like Reddit, Instagram, whatever you call it. I've always been a lurker, and it's so cool to see engagement with the things that I post. And that much definitely was very, very, very cool to see. Although I gotta add that that specific post brought up a lot of like more senior people that had a pretty grim outlook on our industry. And while I see where they were coming from, I think I'm always trying to find like a balance, and we had there was some discussion sparking up in those comments, which was really cool, because that was real engagement. Like, that's what people exchanging opinions and like their feelings as well. So yeah, it was really, really good to see, because the other post that hit really high engagement for me was a meme that I posted like a month ago or so. That was like the highest engagement I ever got on a post up till that point.
Nice.
And obviously that was cool as well, but like it was more, I know that people were like reacted to it because it was funny. But this one actually got people thinking, so it's really cool to see that I can do that. And yeah, I hope that I can do that in the future as well. Like obviously not every post is a success, but
We're excited to see how you channel the learnings from those few into the future.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of seeing your posts pop up in my LinkedIn feed, so I look forward to it. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I was again super excited that you were going to do the show. So yeah, again, thank you. And for anybody listening, as always, you can reach us on our email if you have any questions, comments, and especially if they're for Florian, we can send them along or look him up on LinkedIn. And again, if you're a junior or new, check out Open Doors. They do have listings on there, and we really hope you get something out of this episode. And yeah, Merry Christmas! It'll be Christmas Eve for this
Yeah.
airing. So
Exactly. Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
And again, thanks for having me.